This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. Hardly a day goes by that the downtown east side is not on the front pages of our local newspapers, and that's understandable. It is a unique neighborhood, probably in the world, 4 square city blocks that eat up $1 million a day in social services to over 100 social service agencies. Of late, we've had the so-called scandal of the so-called management of the Portland Hotel Society being turfed and temporarily replaced by various boards and so on. And then we have the story of, the woman who runs Atira Housing being married to the guy who's the head of housing, like the minister didn't know this for the last umpteen years. Oh, that was a big surprise. So what is the downtown east side really about? Is there a solution, or is this, as someone recently said about Israel and the Arabs, it's insoluble because it's an iconic disagreement. It's not even a territorial. It's a disagreement about ideas, and it'll never find solution. Will the downtown east side be like that? Well, Ruth Meta has been living in Strathcona in the downtown east side for some time, and she is also, in addition to running her own business, a floral shop at, I think, 688 East Hastings, she is also a sort of public disturber. She loves going out of her way to annoy politicians, and what an honorable profession that is. Ruth, wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us your first impressions when you first moved to that neighborhood or around that neighborhood, and then we'll get to what your sense of it is today. Well, what was your first sense of it?
Well, I arrived here in Vancouver, August of 1997. I wouldn't know one end of this city from another, yes, because I'd only been here once, many years before. And a relative found us a place in Strathcona, right across the street from McLean Park.
Yes. In
Strathcona, on Georgia, East Georgia. And 2 days after we arrived here, my daughter was 8 when we arrived here. She's 25 now. Yeah. They were putting on plays of Bertolt Brecht in the park right across the street from me.
Wow.
A week later, somebody was putting on, Public Dreams was putting on some fire festival. I thought, yes, I died and went to heaven. Fantastic. I love the arts. I come, yes, from Parkdale, West End, Toronto, also, yes, very challenged,
yes, but
also very artistic.
Okay.
Wherever you find challenges, you find artists.
Okay.
It took a few weeks to find out that the neighborhood itself did not perceive itself the same way I saw it. It saw thousands of issues in housing and sex trade workers and this issue and that issue and drug addiction, and that's not how I saw it, because I've lived in big, large, yes, cities all over the place.
You saw it as what? As heaven?
Oh, artists everywhere. Every artistic discipline is, yes, represented in East Vancouver.
And then when you strolled away from McLean Park and wandered down towards Main and Hastings, as you probably did, then what did you feel you were entering? What did you feel you were seeing?
Well, it never bothered me because, as I say,
yeah,
I have always lived in areas of cities where there are challenges. I'm originally from Hamilton, Ontario, so in the, yeah, 60s it was boom town because it was a steel city. That is not the case now. When you go
to an optometrist and she asks you, she keeps changing the lenses, she says better, worse, better, worse. So that's what I'm going to ask you. The lens of 18 years, better, worse?
Now?
Yes.
Visually, on Hastings, where our store is, it's worse.
Yes.
Visually.
Gotcha.
Partially because there were a lot of little small business, little restaurants, greasy spoons, yes, hardware stores, brew your owns, and from, I would say, Main Street to Clark, I would say in total there might be 7 legitimate businesses on that street. It's very much like the epicenter of the downtown east side, which is I guess 11 Pigeon Park area.
Right.
How that was 13 years ago. There was nothing down there.
But when I first, see, I've been here a lot longer than you. When I first came here, it wasn't even called the downtown east side. It was relatively benign. I mean, there were some heroin addicts, so what? And there were some people falling out of bars a little too juiced up, so what? But I felt very safe. Lots of people felt very safe. Today, I don't go near the place. I won't go near the place. To me, the downtown east side is a deranged sewer at this point. Now, that's just me. You know, I'm a middle-class snob, and I'm old, and I don't want to be, stabbed with a needle and so on. And to me, it's just wall-to-wall madness.
Well, that's an interesting perception.
But that's not yours, because
Absolutely
you live very near
I
it.
raised a child down there.
Yeah, good for you.
And she is award-winning artist right now. She went to Strathcona School, Britannia,
Yeah.
and is graduating from Emily Carr, and she's been published all over the
That's
world.
great. That's great. But
it is-
that's largely because of you. Because,
No, I don't think so. Not only you don't raise it, it takes
yeah,
a village
it takes
to
a
raise
village.
it.
Yeah.
It's also the value system of the people who live there, and I'm not talking about the people who have illnesses. I'm not
Yes.
talking about people who have experienced severe mental health issues or because they often go together, addiction issues.
Yeah.
I'm talking about regular Joes who live there, and there are lots of regular Joes who live there.
What do you make of some of the things that have become public that people argue about endlessly, like Insight or free needles or free crack pipe kits, or teaching drunks how to make wine? What do you make of those kinds of programs?
Well, I think like all philosophies, it starts with a nugget of a truth.
Yes.
People really have to acknowledge the fact that the idea of harm reduction did not start with the Portland Hotel Society.
Absolutely.
Or DERA.
Yeah.
It started with an organization called DTES, Downtown Eastside Youth Association, and a gentleman named John Turvey, who was given the Order of, I think, BC, because he was a young man who experienced this, straightened himself out later, and recognized that addicts are human beings, which they are, and should be treated with respect, and that they were, because of their sharing of needles and so on and so on, making themselves even sicker. Right. So he came up with the idea of a needle exchange. Over the years, those concepts have grown and mutated and turned into huge conglomerate organizations. People have to really understand that a nonprofit organization is a corporation.
Right.
People don't understand that. It is a corporation.
Well, we have an interesting confluence of two corporations working the downtown east side. One is called Vancouver Coastal Health, which is an ever-expanding bureaucracy, and the other is in particular the Portland Hotel Society, which is allegedly a nonprofit society, although there's some questions to be answered about who was making profits there.
While making money.
Yes.
You can call, a rose by any other name is still,
yeah.
You can call it anything.
Yeah.
This whole nonprofit is a misnomer because, again, a nonprofit is a corporation, as a board of directors. It may have to generate some kind of health benefit or musical benefit or cultural benefit, but it still generates money.
Right.
A lot of the executive directors of some of those very large corporations, nonprofits, the executive directors are making astounding amounts of money. Astounding amounts of money. If you care for the poor, how do you justify making $345,000 for the head of BC Housing, which was just announced 2 days ago?
Yeah, the argument will be, well, we have to pay them competitive street
I've heard
salaries,
that.
right? But I say, wait a minute, I understand that if it's BC Ferries or if it's somebody, but to run a nonprofit social agency doesn't seem reasonable.
Well, especially since the mandate of those agencies is supposed to house the hardest to house people in Canada. Isn't there kind of a quantum leap between people who are living on nothing?
Yes.
and people who are owning 3 or 4 houses in the city of Vancouver.
You said when we were standing outside watching the rain come down that a couple of the leaders of Portland Hotel Society who have been asked to step aside own some pretty good personal real estate.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, and it's worth a fair $1.25.
So does Janice Abbott, head of Atira.
Yeah.
They own property.
Yeah.
All of them own property.
So it's not a sin to own property.
No.
But what are you saying?
What I'm saying, the difference, if you can't live off of $80,000, which I think is a reasonable amount of money, it is very hard work to be an executive director of an agency that deals with people with extreme challenges.
Right.
I'm not negating that.
Right.
And actually, there's hardly any time off. These people are bugging you every 15 minutes. There's always some crisis. Somebody killed themselves or somebody jumped out of a building.
Yeah.
It is difficult. But $80,000 is a reasonable amount of money. $300,000 plus endless perks.
Yes. Is unbearable. It's
it
inappropriate.
Makes no sense.
You will not be the only person who noticed some years ago that Janice Abbott, who runs Atira Housing, has been married to the head of BC Housing. And I'm sure the minister responsible for housing noticed that. How is it that nobody saw this?
Everybody saw it. And Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Are you supposed to call him Minister Coleman?
Yeah.
Rich Coleman, who is Minister of Housing, who lately seems to be not available to speak to any press for anything.
Well, how is it that this issue wasn't raised a long time
It
ago?
has been raised many times.
Yes.
And Mr. Coleman's response has always been,
Yes.
at least over 10
Yes.
years, and she wasn't even married 10 years ago. I think it was only about 4 or 5 years ago. That Mr. Ramsey, who is head of BC Housing, removes himself whenever they discuss anything to do with Atira.
We got to take a break, and we'll come back with more of that. But I love the way Pete McMartin framed this in a column about this issue, and he said, "You mean when they were brushing their teeth before they went to bed,
I saw that.
they never talked business?"
Or when they were in bed.
Yeah. Excuse me, baby, your toes are cold.
Yeah.
And by the way,
Have you heard about that?
We need another.
There's
16.
another project. Have you heard about that?
Okay, we got to take a little break, and your opportunity to send us an email, davidberner.com is the site to go to, and the opportunity for those lovely people who support us in this program to say hello here on Shaw Community Television, Cable 4. Back in a moment with Ruth Meta. This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. Oh, the shark babe has such teeth. Boy, everybody thinks Bobby Darin wrote that, but he didn't. It was Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht in the Threepenny Opera. And Ruth Meta, your picture of where you live is a bit of a threepenny opera.
It is a threepenny opera.
Yeah, so tell us about some of the fun stuff that's showing up these days.
Well, as we talked earlier, what happened? The downtown east side is a microcosm of probably what happens in just about every major urban center in not only Canada, the United States too.
Only more so.
Where over a period of time, somebody figures out you can make a whole lot of money from people who are poor.
Hello, how about methadone? That's a good one.
Yeah, well, there's all kinds of approaches to it. The people who live in the neighborhood call it being a poverty pimp. I was called that once when I was a counselor down there too. So, and I used to say to them, well, if you don't want me to do this, put me out of business, find a job.
Yeah.
But right now, what has happened over the last few years, 4 years, is that there has been this city support of a thing called a street market. Which initially made some sense, just like all this other stuff makes sense initially, that people who are not earning very much money because they were on income assistance could generate some income for themselves by selling stuff, hypothetically, that they found either in a bin or they had old possessions or somebody gave to them.
But Ruth, if you live on Happy Planet, you'd think that would be a good idea.
Wouldn't you? Yeah. I don't live there.
Yeah, well, some people not only live there, they sell Happy Planet, and they get elected to office.
Some people do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what is the market turning out to be, in fact?
There are some people who actually do what I just said. They are legitimate, low-income people, mostly on social assistance, who are through binning, and that's hard work. But there are a lot of other people who seem to have access to the best power tools you've ever seen.
Imagine.
Or 100 shirts still in their original
packaging.
wrapping. Or some kind of drug that...
So this is called publicly supported fencing.
You can call it what you will. Like I said, the rose by any other name still stinks.
Yeah. Amazing, amazing. Does this go on, what is it, once a week, twice a week?
Every Sunday.
Every Sunday. Perfect, the Lord's Day.
Depends if you're Jewish or not. There are many people who do not agree with it. There's a lot of new businesses down there. They have started. Now, whether or not you agree with some of those high-end businesses, I'm not here to discuss what kind of a business somebody started and where they started it. What I am concerned about is that people have a right to generate a revenue, and there are people who live down there who are, number one, Chinese or don't speak English, just want to go from here to there, and they have to walk by this gauntlet of people who clog up the streets, some of whom, please emphasize, some of whom are not operating legally. And the people who are running this market were never elected to represent those people. They have barred anyone who is a legitimate vendor from even being on their board of directors.
But we live in a culture, Ruth, as you know, that is obsessed with personal rights. And so you cannot say to people who are, as you put it, clogging up the streets, excuse me, people would like to walk past here, because you're interfering with their right to stand around and clog up the streets.
Who said you can't?
So if you were mayor or the police chief or a queen for a day or the god of all things, what small and or big things might you start to do about your hood?
Far be it from me to have answers to all the complex
but how about a couple of little things?
Well,
Some of your favorites.
I can tell you, and I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for this. I'm getting flack anyway. I'm used to it. We opened a business at 688 East Hastings, which is Strathcona, but it's not far. 6 months ago, in order to open that business, we had to have a criminal record check as a new business owner, because Gastown, Strathcona, and downtown Eastside requires all new businesses to go through a criminal record check. Added expense and a 3-week delay in opening your business till the VPD gets back to you.
if I open a floral edible plants store, as you have, on Denman Street, I wouldn't have to do that?
Nope, only there.
Neat.
So if we have to do it, why don't the vendors at that market have to do that? Oh, the answer is going to be, well, they don't have any money. Well, what makes anybody think that anybody who opens a business has extra money and can wait it? You know, this hypothesis that people own a business and rolling in dough is also a stereotype.
So what else would you do that that doesn't personally affect you directly, like your business?
It doesn't affect us because we're not down there, but there are businesses down there it does affect. There are also residents who live down there who are not part of that market. It affects them too.
What's your take today? Today we had a big headline that homelessness, which was the mayor's platform, has in fact increased dramatically from numbers of 1,100 to more like 1,800. What do you think we're doing correctly or not doing correctly on that issue? Because it's a tough one.
Well, people, we are part of a bigger world. We
Yes.
are not, it's not just Vancouver, it's
Yeah.
British Columbia,
It's
it's also
Canada, it's-
affected by Canada, it's
Yeah,
affected by a
Uruguay,
global
it's-
economy,
yeah,
the
yeah.
entire European zone and Greece,
Yeah.
and all the conflicts in the Middle East.
Yeah.
It has, somebody decided we should have a global economy. I wonder who.
Yeah.
So when it happens over there, it may take 4 or 5 years, but eventually it affects us. People are losing their jobs. Our economy, I don't care what StatsCan says. I have a business and I can look around me. People are losing their jobs.
It's funny that StatsCan came out with this statement over the last few days, which the press has eaten up, that we have this very happy middle class. I think they're...
Where are they?
Yeah, that's what I'd like to know. Who are these people?
I don't know.
'Cause
We
haven't met
used to have a middle class, but
Yeah.
it's sinking.
Apparently, we have a better middle class than America does, or a bigger one, and I think that's nuts.
Because there's only 3 people here and they have a whole bunch of people over there.
Look, the mayor and other people have worked hard trying to get people off the street and into reasonable accommodation. Do you think they're making some progress?
Oh, I think the will is there, but people really have to understand that a few years ago, when this province purchased a bunch of SROs
Yep.
and put out tenders for various nonprofits to manage those SROs, first of
Yep.
all, a lot of them were not updated at the time, and residents who were already there had to sit and wait till they came up with enough money to make those livable. And also, those new buildings, all of them, are not protected by the Residential Tenancy Act. Those tenants are not tenants, they are patients. They are little river views.
Yes.
So if your landlord, Atira, PHS, whoever, doesn't like you, you can be thrown out overnight.
They are little river views,
That's
but
what they
without
are.
programming.
No, they have some have programming and some
Yes.
don't. But most of them do. They have resident psychiatrists who drop by every once in a while, make sure you take your drugs.
Yeah.
They have home support workers, people who clean your room for you. Some people do your laundry for you. Some people will assist you to court if you have a court issue. That is not done in regular low income like Atira used to have.
There's some talk about reopening Riverview. There's a standard sort of common wisdom, which may not be so wise, that once Riverview closed, there weren't accommodations, there weren't programs in place, and we just threw people onto the street. That has some truth to it, but Riverview was a dreadful mess.
It was.
I've been there
It
many
was.
times, and when it was operating, and it should have been closed for what it was at the time. Do you see any sense in it being the doors opening again?
If it's updated, the original building is like right out of Cuckoo's Nest.
Yes,
I
exactly.
certainly wouldn't want to
Yeah.
live there. I'd rather live under a bridge if it were myself.
And what they did was Cuckoo's Nest. I visited a friend many years ago who was literally weaving baskets.
Oh yeah, when I was younger, I have spent some time in psychiatric institutions. I'm nuts as anybody.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
they still are very punitive, even though they say all sorts of other things. They can be very punitive.
Tell me, we just have about 3 minutes left. Tell me 2 or 3 things that you think are really working and that you're really proud of, or that you see in the downtown east side and Strathcona that you think are pretty solid.
Well, I think you have to ask, why the heck would I even come back there and open a business in another rundown area?
Okay,
Because
why would you come back there?
Why
and
would
run
I
it
do
out?
that?
Yeah.
Because at the heart of Strathcona, in the heart of the downtown east side, is the strongest community I have ever run
Really?
into.
Really?
People do care about each other. Addicts grow organic food. I know there's a contradiction here. Go
Yes.
figure that out. You think you can fix a crack addiction by eating organic food? No,
Yeah.
you can't.
Yes.
But at least they feel like they're contributing.
Yeah.
People do care about, they do, you mentioned Israel
Yeah.
and Palestine.
Yeah.
Very much like that.
Yeah.
The biggest export of the downtown east side is opinions.
Yes, of
Everybody
course.
has a zillion opinions.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that is charming about
Yeah.
the downtown east side is everyone does have an opinion, whether you're right or wrong. Everybody cares. They really do care.
Are you a fan of Vandu, Vancouver?
Absolutely not.
Vancouver Area
No.
Network of Drug Users?
No, I'm not a fan of enabling people. I am a fan of empathy, not pity. I do not agree with pitying people. I think it's insulting.
But the Vandu people insist that they have a right to be drug users, and that we should support them.
I don't care
in
what
their
they
drug
say.
use.
They have a right to their opinion. They have a right to dignity. They have a right to be treated with respect. But if they don't treat other people with respect, they have a right to be treated the way they treat other people.
Here's a tough question. Can you be a dignified using drug addict?
Yes, there are people who, I've actually met people who say they are functioning, heroin addicts in particular.
Yes?
The
Not
others,
a lot. A handful, maybe.
there might be a handful.
Yeah.
There might be a handful.
Yeah.
But if you had a child
Yes.
who wandered into the middle of traffic,
Yes.
would you let them go? I think it's society's responsibility. When you're using some of those drugs, you are not of your right mind. It is our responsibility from stopping them to wander into that street. And I don't think it's wrong to say, no, your behavior is inappropriate.
And instead, what we're doing is giving them
Enab-
shin pads. Well, if you get hit by a taxi, we might be able to save your shin bones.
Yes, something like that. It's called enabling.
It's called enabling. Ruth, thank you so much for being with us.
Very nice to meet you.
It's nice to see you. Ruth Meta, our guest for today. And next week, we will continue sort of on this theme, but the story then is the Mid-Maine Community Health Center and other health centers. Vancouver Coastal Health, in their endless wisdom, wants to close down about 5 of these community health centers, and they should all show up at Ravenswood at 8th Ravensong at 8th and Ontario with all the people with mental issues and addictions. That makes a lot of sense. We'll have a couple of guests who are going to reveal all the sensibility of that next week. Thanks so much for being with us here on Shaw Community Television, Cable 4. Good night.